Okay, in the next few videos what we're going to do is look at a couple different types of loops. We're going to start off with the for loop, which is used a lot of times when you know how many elements or how many times the loop needs to go through it. So you're going through it for a set amount of time and executing the amount of code a certain number of times, for example. This is used a lot of times with arrays. There is a property of the array that tells you how many items there are in the array, and you can use that to control how many times your loop changes. And we'll look at that in later examples. But for now, what we're going to do is we're going to add some code to a previous example. We did our weird little husband picker. And what we're going to do is we're going to loop through this array, and we're going to print out all of the items in the array. And so we're going to have a little statement that says, the bachelors that are vying for your attention are, and then we're going to run our loop and have it print out all of our gentlemen. So let's go ahead and just take a look at the code again. Remember, they're putting in a number from 1 to 10, and we're choosing their number based on that. But what we're going to work with in this example is this husband array we've set up. We numbered the indexes from 1 to 10, so we'll need our loop to go from 1 to 10, and we'll use that loop counter as the way to choose the item in the loop to print out. So let's do this. Let's do document.write, and we'll say these bachelors are vying for your attention. And then what we'll do is we will set up a loop. So we're going to say for loop counter equals 1. So we're going to initialize the value at 1. If we were going through an array that had self-populated, we would probably start with 0, because remember, a lot of times arrays automatically start counting in the 0 slot. We also need to tell it how long it needs to run. So it's going to run, let's go ahead and do this. We're going to run our loop as long as it is less than 11. Once it goes to 11, there's not an 11th thing in our array, and so it needs to stop. And then we're going to tell it to use the increment. So every time it goes through the loop, it'll increase our loop counter by 1. And so all of the code that is going to execute during our loop is going to be between opening and closing curly braces. So all we're going to do is we're going to go in here and we're going to say document.write. Now all we want to do is go into the husband array at the loop counter spot. So when loop counter is 1, it'll write the first husband. It'll increment to 2, it'll come in and write the second husband, so on and so forth. Eventually it will write our 10th bachelor, and then when it increments to 11, it'll drop out and it will look for somebody in the husband array spot number 11. Now I'm also going to concatenate on, and this is kind of weird for those of you who haven't used the document.write yet. We're going to concatenate on a BR tag, and what that's going to do is it's going to put a break in and cause the next husband to be written on its own separate line. So that's the only line of code that we're going to do. It's going to run through it 10 times, writing out everybody in our array, and then of course it's going to tell us who we're going to marry. So let's see how that works. I'm going to go ahead and save that. I'm going to go back to our browser. I'm going to reopen our husband picker. It's going to come up and ask me what my favorite number is. We click OK, and we have an error again. So let's go ahead and open up our console and see that we have husband array is not defined. So I have missed an A on husband array. That's on line 26. So I go back to my code, go to line 26, and sure enough, husband array is not husband array. So we save that, go back to our browser, hit reload. Number 8, bachelors are vying for attention. It tells me who they are, and it says I'm going to marry Mark because that's what matched up with the 8th slot. But notice that it did print all of our bachelors. We probably want that guy on his own line. That's easily fixed. We go back to our code and we just concatenate a break in there. Don't even have to concatenate it in since it is literally string. And your book gives a good example of why you can integrate HTML code and can't. So now it's on its own line, and then it tells us who we're going to marry. So a for loop in this case, like I said, it's useful for when you know how many times you want to go through a loop. We knew we only wanted to go through this loop 10 times to print all of our options. There's an easier way to do it, which we'll work with when we work with arrays in a later chapter. But for now, we can preset the loop and tell it to run once it starts at 1, but don't run it past that loop counter going to 11 when it is incremented by 1. So in the next one, we're going to look at a do loop, and we'll talk about the difference between the do and the while loop. So there is your for loop.